Uh, Thank you, Dr. Greenspoon, for your
Thank you, Dr.
presentation. We do have time for some questions, so what you can do is just submit them over the GoToWebinar control panel, and I'll read them off, and Dr. Greenspoon can answer. We do have a couple questions, so the first one, how did your validation study affect your understanding of TrueAllele's reliability?
Oh, I think there's nothing that replaces seeing something for yourself, and I would say the combination of our own in-house validation work as well as the training that cybergenetics provided really provided not just an education but a confidence in the reliance on the process. It's a smart, very smart software program.
Okay. Next question. How does TrueAllele mixture interpretation compare with threshold-based methods?
I'm sorry, compare with what?
Threshold-based methods.
Oh, threshold-based methods? Oh, well, there's that's where the difference really is pronounced. One thing, TrueAllele, that's interesting that you could see a little bit more readily with the single source samples is that you could certainly see that the genotype certainty, the probabilities associated with a particular genotype were larger, and it was proportional, you know, to some degree with the peak heights themselves. I mean, the larger the peaks, the more the probability values would reflect that certainty. And the smaller the peaks, the more imbalanced, well, then the probability values would also slide lower. And so you can graphically see the continuous nature of the process when you take a simple sample like the single source profiles and see the output generated. So it's a really different procedure because, you know, it's true, a lot more of the data can be utilized that can't be utilized or is just ignored when you apply thresholds. So we can really see the value in using more of the data.
Thank you. Next question. What did people learn from the TrueAllele admissibility hearing?
Well, that TrueAllele admissibility hearing really included a lot of science. And it was very interesting. Dr. Perlin was extremely well prepared and really had numerous paper citations at his fingertips, or really literally just on the tip of his tongue, to support the work that he's done and the foundation for the TrueAllele process in this statistical approach. So in that sense, I think just being able to sit in the courtroom and listen to Dr. Perlin's testimony provided additional knowledge to me and to the others in our TrueAllele team as far as, you know, the widespread use of this kind of statistical approach and sort of the history of this statistical approach. Also, the judge was interesting when he was ruling, giving his ruling. He really placed a lot of weight to our lab's validation work because it wasn't from a company. It was our own internal validation study, and the judge placed a lot of emphasis on that.
All right. Next question. Would you be comfortable testifying about TrueAllele mixture results in court, and why?
Yes, I think so. I mean, obviously, I'm not Mark Perlin, and I'm not a statistician, but I have tested it on a wide number of samples now, not just that are in my validation study, but also we've performed TrueAllele analysis as part of our training, and it's the proof is in the process. I do feel comfortable with it. I've observed the performance of the system with my own samples and in my own hands, as well as during the training. And so I feel, while I may not be as eloquent a speaker regarding the process of what goes on with the deconvolution and the whole analysis, I feel that I can testify in good faith regarding the performance and my confidence in the results.
The next question is, can you have concordance using two different cycles, such as 100,000 and 200,000?
Yes. Yes, we have numerous examples of that, and it's been, depending on the mixture sample, the more complex the mixture, the bigger difference that I've seen if you're going from, say, 50,000 cycles to 100,000 cycles. But 100 to 200,000, that seems to be much more subtle, if any difference. Sometimes it seems that the longer cycles have the biggest impact if it's just a really, really minor contributor. And internally, we intend to have a manual assessment of the mixtures as well as the TrueAllele assessment. And when the contributor is that minor, I'm not sure that that individual would be conclusively included by the human. So you can certainly have concordant runs with different cycle numbers. That we see that all the time.
The next question is, from one of the early slides, non-concordance was shown at Tho1 with an allele pair of 715, but the Tho1 ladder only goes to 13.3. Was this just an artifact?
I don't actually know the answer as to why that bizarre result, or that high probability was affixed to that extremely low probability genotype. I know that the cybergenetics database, allele frequency database, is much larger. Their data sets are much larger than ours at Virginia, so it's possible. I assumed, but I didn't check up on it, that they may have had, rare observations of a 15 allele. I don't know the answer to that, but I do want to reiterate that that was not a run that we considered to be ideal. It was not a good analysis. Or I shouldn't say it was a bad analysis. It was just not ideal, and it was not concordant. So we would not have utilized that for reporting purposes. It was not concordant with what we knew was an ideal analysis.
Our next question is, do you have an inconclusive likelihood ratio zone for casework reporting, such as -2 to 2?
Yeah, we've talked about that, and we've defined certain criteria under which we would deem something inconclusive. For one thing, if between analyses, for example, this one analysis, the individual provides a small positive match score, the other analysis, this individual comparison with this individual provides a negative log likelihood ratio, then we would deem that person inconclusive. We have talked about a window, and I don't think that's been finalized in our draft of our manual yet. We're still debating whether to leave it undefined and up to the analyst discretion, or whether it would be plus or minus 1 log likelihood ratio. So plus or minus a log of 1. We've talked about that being an inconclusive range, but we haven't finalized our SOP yet. It's almost there. I mean, we're going to be going live in the next couple of weeks, but that particular issue, we're actually discussing that tomorrow morning. But there are going to be certain circumstances where the data say it's inconclusive. But as far as whether we have a boundary set, predefined boundaries, plus or minus 1 log likelihood ratio, that question still needs to be resolved.
The next question is, are you using TrueAllele for all or just selected samples from specific cases?
That's a good question, and we've discussed this internally. What we're going to do initially is use TrueAllele for a category of samples, because easy samples, if it's an easy 2-person mixture, then it would just go straight to, we would just do a manual mixture deconvolution and crunch the numbers using armed expert. Anything like a more complex, sort of difficult 2-person mixture where there may be a lot of dropout or alleles in the stochastic range, 3-person mixture, anything, basically if it's not an easy 2-person mixture and if it's a 3-person mixture, then it's going to go to TrueAllele. We may, depending on how inundated we are with cases, we may opt out of doing TrueAllele on possession cases, like gun possession cases or drug possession cases, sort of cases that aren't as high a priority as, say, an armed robbery or a homicide or a rape. So that's kind of how we're going forward approaching this.
Our next question is, will you report positive match statistics that are as low as the false positive match stat that you obtained during validation? Or did you set a threshold for this based on your validation?
That's a good question. The false positive match score that I generated was 2.9 times more likely. If we wind up, and like I said, we haven't finalized our manual yet. If we wind up defining an inconclusive territory of plus or minus 1 log unit, then that value would fall into the inconclusive range, because that would be plus or minus 10 times more likely. So that hasn't been completely, that hasn't been completely resolved. I think we're going to make a definitive resolution on that, as we release our manual.
Okay. Our next question is, does your lab state exclusions of reference samples using TrueAllele? And then again, what log value, like as you said, is inconclusive in your lab?
Well, those, if an individual is excluded by the examiner comparing it, well, then it's not going to go forward to any TrueAllele analysis. But if a comparison generated a negative match score, we're planning to report that, yes.
What were the differences between the parameters of the ideal and non-ideal runs for the same samples?
Well, the primary difference was with the histogram and the MCMC sampling. Sometimes the MCMC would be extremely flat, as though there were just insufficient sampling given a complexity of a mixture. And so that was just deemed non-ideal. So the first assessment was really with the Markov chain and the histogram as far, and it's that metric then was assessed within the context of the sample itself. If it was a very simple two-person mixture, well then you wouldn't really need a lot of sampling to resolve that. If it were a complex mixture, then more sampling may be necessary to resolve that mixture. That was the major assessment between ideal and non-ideal. Also, the Gelman-Rubin statistic, the convergence value, ideally we wanted it to be 1.2 or lower. But if it was over 1.2 but under approximately 1.5 and all of the other values were very consistent with another analysis, then we would deem that, you know, usable, and it wouldn't be considered non-ideal, even though the Gelman-Rubin was kind of high. Once it was over 1.5, or, you know, if it's 2.0 or something, then we generally did not utilize that for genotype comparison or genotype concordance.
We have a couple more questions here. Next is, when you have ideal and non-ideal results on repetitive runs, can you explain again how you deal with those results? And what does it mean when all replicates do not provide ideal results?
That's a good question, because that evaluation of ideal, non-ideal, and the way that we went about things will probably vary from lab to lab. We're tending to be pretty conservative when we start out and sort of setting the bar pretty high. And we'd like to start out at least kind of demanding very ideal analyses. What we've observed is the biggest difference between an ideal and non-ideal analysis may be in a non-ideal analysis, you might not be able to capture the most minor contributor. In the ideal analyses, TrueAllele does a great job of capturing even the most minor contributor. There has to be an awful lot of allelic and locus dropout for that minor contributor not to be captured with some sort of small positive match score. So the real difference at the end of the process winds up being in the ability to capture the more minor contributors. And you know, that also runs into whether in a human review you would even include or deem inconclusive this minor contributor, because it winds up being, as I said, frequently the case where the most minor contributor displays a lot of allelic and locus dropout. Hopefully that answered that question.
The last question we have is, how long did you run TrueAllele for the 3- and 4-person mixtures?
You mean for the cycle number, or the number of hours or days or something? What specifically length? What exactly? What is this question? Is this individual asking?
I believe it's both cycle parameters and time, if you know that.
Well, the 3- and 4-person mixtures, if I have a 3-person mixture and I run it for 100,000 cycles, which is pretty standard under what we're requiring, that can take, you know, 4 days, 3 days. If you have a 4-person mixture, because now you have added a layer of complexity, or you're assessing that same mixture and you're saying, well, I want to run it as a 3-person and I'm going to run it as a 4-person. The 4-person, even if it's still at 100,000 cycles, it takes a little bit longer as far as hours of computer time. So the 3- and 4-person mixtures will take, if you run it that long, will take you know, several days.
This is Mark Perlin. Hi.
Hi, Mark.
Hi, I'd just like to add something. I know we've been doing more studies. We have 3 of them so far, nothing written up, but just with different user groups on speed of TrueAllele. Originally, TrueAllele solved problems in less than a minute. I did a demo at Promega Live 10 years ago where we solved a minor contributor in about 30 seconds on a laptop. And as time's gone on, we've added more variables to make it more robust, so that you don't really have to, after you validate, you don't really have to worry about it. But we've been doing studies on the speed of the system, and what we're finding is that you can drop the cycle time down to 5,000 cycles, down from 100,000 cycles, running assuming 3 contributors, and pretty much every 2.5 hours knock out another answer. So we've had this conversation, you and I, about do you want to always get that 4th contributor or 3rd minor contributor, or are there advantages in only getting 95% of the genotypes that are in the data? So I think the question was asking, does this take a really, really long time? And an answer is, it depends on what you're looking for. If you want to get through a lot of data quickly and capture 90-95% of what's there automatically, then you can run this process in hours instead of in days. And if you want to get down into the weeds and see what's happening in that 5% fourth contributor, then you would have to run it longer.
Okay, this is Matt again. So I think that's going to wrap us up for the day. I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and I'd like to thank Susan for the great presentation.